So from my time with Adrian, I've found him to be somebody who's really accepting of new ideas. Crazy stuff from left field, he'll take on and he'll come up with something else. He'll expand upon it and make it into something that is beyond what I could have possibly imagined.
What I like about Adrian is that his creativity is real, it's genuine. His works really do defy logic. They're a visual interruption, I find them. I'm fascinated by most of them.
So at an early age, I recognised that I had a different focus from everyone else. I was very focused on thinking about my thinking. And that sort of made me feel like, you know, that wasn't a concern for everyone else. So that definitely made me feel different. So I think once they put the label of dyslexia on me, it was in one sense liberating for my parents, but I felt like I was being put into a box. And it just seemed equally as ridiculous to me to be trying to define me continuously. So I definitely felt like I wanted to reject that.
Yeah, no, he's always been very artistic. I remember as a young kid he used to be talking to me straight in my eyes, looking in my eyes, and have a lump of clay in his hand. We'd have a conversation for 10 minutes and then he'd just put down a perfect drag and walk off, and he never looked at the clay the whole time he was sort of talking to me, you know. So always had this amazing artistic flair.
So I was glad when my mum finally got it together to find a school that was going to be at least just a little bit real with it, you know. And, you know, in that environment I was able to get into the art room and really punch out some feelings about the real world to me. I was, you know, it was a haven, it was a sanctuary in a sense.
I think as time went on, you know, we started to notice that our friends and their families weren't quite like ours, you know, as you just sort of pick these things up as you go to your friend's place, you know. Our house, for example, we didn't have friends come over, it wasn't a done thing. It's just, there was a few elements of Dad and the way things roll. We were quite separate from society and how everyone else was working. We were never part of the club, so to speak. We were just outsiders a bit.
There was this mystery about my dad, and you know, it's this sort of ever-increasing mystery, and it was something that he couldn't escape, and I could see it was stressing him out. It was tension with him, you know. He was trying to maintain it, you know, but for some reason he had to keep up some deep facade that would stop anyone finding out this mystery.
So one day we got back from the holiday house. We'd been away for the weekend, and as we ran to the door to get in, because you know you're always the first to try and get to the heater because they always turned it down on us, so we were always running there and hit that. I noticed that in the bathroom, the toilet there in the hallway opposite the heater, there was this mirror smashed all over the floor from the bathroom, and I ran in there wondering what's going on, and I looked into the wall cavity, which had been cut out behind the mirror.
And behind was this, it was really like a pirate stash of cash, gold bars, silver bars, and it seemed to be like the lining of the inside lining of the wall was completely chocked full of this sort of wealth.
There was all sorts of stuff going on there, and I ran with age back to Dad and basically said, someone's broken in and left all this money for us, you know. And he sort of whizzed us in there and he said to us, this is our secret, no one looks behind a mirror. This is what you just keep this completely quiet. And it's like,
I think for myself, it did start to put together this picture that there was something probably a little different about the you know, how my world was being created. best childhoods are probably the ones you can't remember, and mine ticked over quite normally, but the tension of me being dyslexic started to ramp up. I was able to cover up the dyslexia, even in Press Hill, for quite a long time. I was able to sort of get away from reading in class and doing all these things until really year 11, and I was doing English literature there, and yes, the day came where I had to read a page. They said, just read one page, and I think it was pretty clear that I was stumbling around. The gig was up, and then when I did a sit-down test in year 11, I'm sure the staff room said, have a look what Adrian's produced here, but he's not going to be able to do VCE, he's not going to be able to do HSC. So teacher Kay in the art room said, look, you know, he could get an art folio together and he could do a TAP in Box Hill, which would mean I would have a folio and then I could put that to art school and get a fine arts degree. And at the end of year 11, I had quite a reasonable folio of painting and a few different sculptures and things. And I submitted to Box Hill TAFE, and yeah, I got in, and yeah, that was really the start of me getting quite serious about doing art. I'd moved out of home and I was really developing my own life, you know. But then there was a couple of incidences that I started to realise, you know, my dad is getting a little unhinged. Like, he was not an emotional person. Well, there was one incident where me, my brother and a mate of ours had snuck up to the holiday house, and, you know, we'd been just having a little holiday there. We cleaned everything up, left, but they'd found out that we'd actually had been there.
Then one of my dad's replica gun, which he drilled the end out, so it did look very real, went missing. I'm not sure if it was a maid or what happened there, but it caused a bit of an outrage in the family. Dad was very furious, not only the fact that we were down there without his permission, but also that his gun went missing, and it was not a good scene.
Turns out some builders had been working next door. They'd had a look through the house and they'd taken it. But he was, when I saw him there, I thought, that guy's unhinged and it's escalating. My brother's next to him looking freaked out because my brother had sort of, I don't know if he'd left school, but he was hanging out with my dad. You know, he's still living at home. And it all looked a bit unhealthy to me. I thought, my old man is starting to, that looks a bit unhinged.
Instant carnage my whole life. Yeah, it was very dramatic at the time because there was no time to really digest it. It was just instant. I didn't have anything to like leading up going, oh, he's not well, he's not happy. It was just one day it was Dad and one day he just died, killed himself. It was just instant. It was very, very traumatic.
And really that started to open up a world of mystery that was sort of going on. We discovered that he was a drug dealer and he'd been importing drugs. And, you know, though he'd had a whole lot of businesses, you know, really it had been drugs that had been sponsoring our childhood the whole time. So it was difficult. It was 3 months before I was finishing a 3-year degree for art school, for doing fine art sculpture. It couldn't have been at a worse time. And I literally trashed everything that I'd been making except for a couple of things. And just for 2 or 3 months, just was in the garage, just building a whole new folio of the most bizarre stuff you've ever seen. I wheeled it all into the art school for the final presentation. I had UV lights, I had glass tanks, bubbling fluorescent things going on. I had things whizzing around. I had all sorts of stuff playing out psychological dramas in my head of my old man. But the reality was I'd been turning everything in the garage all my dad's bits and pieces into 1,000 different sculptures and cutting up, tearing it up, materials I'd never be able to afford normally. I just didn't give a stuff. I just grabbed everything and just turned it into sculpture.
In the aftermath of Dad dying, everyone was scrambling for a reason why this could have happened, why this might have happened, you know. So I think it was that point where we realised we really had to find ourselves, because the only people we could trust in the whole world was me and my brother, you know, and my sister, but she was a bit young, so she wasn't sort of quite in the thing. So me and my brother, really, I think it was about trying to find out what love was, the abandonment of love. That sort of whole thing was pretty full on time for us to sort of work through that love element, you know, it's, the abandonment of the whole thing, yeah.
Really, all my options in Melbourne started to shut down, and it was clear at some point that we were just going to have to leave Melbourne and to find some other life.
So once we took off on the bikes, we sort of headed north, and just to find ourselves really. But of course, in that process, you know, you need to really delve into your emotions, and of course, debauchery, you know, drugs, alcohol were all definitely part of the mix.
Eventually ended up near Nimbin. We stayed in the forest one night, and it was just so fantastic. The relationship with nature was just, it was massively healing for us. There was other food for the mind that was growing around the place, and we fell in love with it, so much so we decided to just live in the forest. Nimbin was around the corner. Nimbin was off the charts. It was ridiculous. It was some remnant from 1975, and just the place just fitted every expectation we had of an alternative world, of an alternative suburban reality.
So as time drew on, of course, me and age and the party lifestyle started to wear a bit thin, you know. It was fun, but it's no way to live your life. So we sort of parted ways at that point. I went to the communes for a little while, and he went to sort of a house and what have you. And eventually I just sort of drifted back to Melbourne and left Age there on his own sort of thing, you know, because he loved it there, but it was enough for me.
I could see the signs of feeling very unsatisfied with my life again. Even though I'd been making art the whole time, done some good things, it was time to hit the road again, unfortunately, and as hard as it was to pull away from Nimbin and that life, it had ended for me. It seemed that the very real part of my childhood was involved in silver and gold, something we could rely on. After the global financial meltdown, it really felt like there was no reality. $1 trillion to bail out banks was a destruction of the real value in the world. And I deeply felt that, because I was thinking, you know, my old man was in the background doing all this mysterious stuff, exactly like world banks, exactly like, you know, people who are trading and stuff like that, all these financial instruments, it's total facade. And that was exactly the same thing I was seeing being played out. In a sense, the Divine Father was falling again with all these machinations going on in the background and the erosion of real world value. And so I swung in to basically casting absolute rubbish into gold and silver. I ended up casting a discarded coffee cup with a line of gold coming out of it, and I was determined to really make that work. I jumped in my car and I realised that I just made something that was vastly more expensive than my own car. I'd turned a piece of rubbish into the most expensive commodity in the world, and just for that moment, I got this palpable feeling of being freed from the monetary system, this concept of everything having a specific monetary value. I was free from it, and it did remind me of being back in the forest, the freedom that I had, where I could actually just see the world for what it was. So after the coffee cup, my resources pretty much dried up. And I went into the city to pick up a small amount of silver with the last of my resources, and this is when I connected with Mark. He had a passion for silver and gold bullion, and also he had a real passion for sculpture. So as soon as we started talking, we started shooting around ideas, and straight off the bat we started making sculptures together.
Adrian can recognise that there are everyday objects that say something about you that you don't realise, and put it into a context that you would not expect. And it says a message that you can't believe that you didn't come up with yourself. So for example, I had a pair of Air Jordan 6s that I wore whilst coaching my boys to 2 grand finals. Adrian took these boots and he's made the world's biggest silver sculpture out of one of them. And if you saw that thing, so it was clear to me that Adrian had a similar understanding about the corruption of money that I did. And it was clear to me that he was capable of doing much more than what we've done so far. So we wanted to go bigger, like really big.
I was introduced to Adrian about 11 months ago via a mutual friend, Mark Bainbridge. I'd been investing in silver for about 7 or 8 years, and to some degree I was a bit bored with it. It's a pretty benign investment. And I was kind of intrigued by Adrian because he's pretty radical, or he occurred radical, but I was struck by the passion he had for silver. It wasn't some flimsy, he really seemed to have been taken by it. And I personally could relate to that because, it's been centuries, in fact, millennia of real money on the planet.
So as a result of our group, we've started developing this new project, which I'm extremely proud about because it really encapsulates everything I want to communicate as an artist. So one of my greatest inspirations is definitely Rodin, particularly for his real ability to communicate physical power, especially masculine physical power. And nothing's more poignant than The Thinker. And it's really why it's become one of the most famous sculptures in the world.
We wanted to show the rest of the world that how corrupt our monetary system has become. We wanted to be able to indicate that there are other options out there. The money we use isn't real money. Only gold and silver is money. So let's build a sculpture that shows the truth about money.
What I've done is I've taken The Thinker, which originally was put on the doors of hell, and I've put him on a wad of cash on a pedestal, and I've changed the position of his hands, and he's holding a mobile phone that's in solid gold. He's an incredibly powerful looking physical figure, and he's got all this money. And yet at the same time, he's completely demasculated, because although he's got this physical power and his perception of wealth, he also understands that he is at the whim of powers way out of his control, and particularly the financial system, which has eroded his ability to financially protect himself and his family against hard times, which was, in the past, his greatest strength.
He's trapped by the destruction of money that we've had around us. He's sitting there on a pile of silver money, but he can't do anything with it.
Artwork has really gone to new heights with that. It's also allowed me the ability to go and work in schools as an artist in residence. And that's important because I really feel in a lot of ways I'm giving back to the children who were in my situation when I was a kid. They have labels on them, but once they get into the art materials, once they start getting their hands dirty and engaging in the art process, they're really involved in this creative expression, which I've found so important in my life.
I know Adrian has had to overcome a lot of obstacles in his life. What really encouraged me and inspires me is the degree to which he has dealt with them. And in a bizarre kind of way, the degree to which that tragedy, the Shakespearean tragedy, adds to the quality of his art. So I'm really excited. I have no doubt that Adrian will continue to develop spectacularly, and his pieces will show up in pretty much every gallery around the planet.
He's the greatest artist I've ever known, and any medium he can work with, it's quite outstanding. And that's finally, I'm so glad that he gets a little bit of recognition for the absolutely outstanding art he can do on any form, you know, anything. It's amazing. He really works hard. He's dedicated his life to it. But I must admit, he's just had this amazing talent where he's been able to just create any, you know, from clay to fiberglass to plaster to now the bullion, which is, to me, his highlight of his career. So it's great to have people appreciate that.
You know, in a lot of ways, I feel like my life has come full circle. And, you know, I've had ups and downs. I mean, life has suffering involved. And, you know, it's interesting, working with silver, has this intrinsic value, and it's really allowed me to find my own intrinsic value and to really understand my own personal sense of worth. And if I can communicate that with my art, I would be very happy with that.